So for our final project, me, Tara, and Elise all decided to study or go more in depth into issues of mental health, especially in adolescents and adults.
So as you can see here on one third of our brochure that we made, we went into mental health affecting all age groups. And so this top section is highlighting the just the debate topic that we did on adolescence, which is defined as age 10 through 19 years old. And as we saw, mental health in adolescence is on the rise due to an increase in external pressures and sources of stress more than any other generation. Some of these triggers include genetics, one's social environment, social media, their home environment, and stress related to going to college.
Mental illnesses are relatively common in adults. Nearly 1 in 5 adult Americans experience mental health illness each year. Unfortunately, more than half do not seek treatment due to mental health care not being like financially accessible, or the availability of mental health professionals, and even the social stigma of mental health will prevent adults from seeking treatment. One thing to note is that mental health can change over time. Adults do experience a lot more just potential stressors in their life, like compared to adolescence, and common triggers that can affect their mental health could include early adverse life experiences, like childhood trauma can stay and permanently change their brain into adulthood. Major life changes, the loss of a loved one, chronic medical problems as they age, and loneliness or isolation. The first mental illness we'll talk about is depression. Depression is a common and serious mood disorder that causes persistent feelings of sadness and loss of interest in activities that a person once enjoyed. Depression affects the hippocampus, the area of the brain in charge of memory, the amygdala, which is responsible for emotional responses. So stress plays a big role in depression in both the amygdala and the hippocampus. In the hippocampus, elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol will inhibit the production of new neurons. This can cause weakened neuron connections in the hippocampus, leading to depressed mood and possibly memory problems. In the amygdala, cortisol or elevated levels of cortisol can lead to elevated brain activity in the amygdala. This will cause sleep disturbances and changes in activity levels, and even it can affect hormone changes in other parts of the brain. So we can see that depression has a lot of factors and can affect multiple parts of the brain.
So the second mental illness we're going to be talking about is PTSD. It's better known as post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a psychological disorder that affects people who have witnessed or experienced a traumatic event. It's most common in war veterans, victims of sexual assault or abuse, or any other form of traumatic experience that could happen in one's life. PTSD is one form of an anxiety disorder, so it affects similar parts of the brain, that being the amygdala. Our amygdala is known as our natural alarm system. So when it's triggered, our body kind of shuts down all rational thinking, and its only thought is focused on survival. So when someone is suffering from PTSD, it usually stems from a traumatic experience. This makes the amygdala more sensitive. So any small event that can trigger a fear response in our body stimulates the amygdala, and all of a sudden all forms of rational thinking is shut down, and the body just reverts to a flight or fight mode. Usually when this happens, our prefrontal cortex is responsible for managing the emotional responses that they receive, But when people are affected by PTSD, the prefrontal cortex doesn't always do its job. So it's basically a combination of an overactive amygdala and an underactive prefrontal cortex that causes patients to suffer from PTSD.
And the last mental illness that we're going to highlight today is anxiety. Anxiety is defined as a less intense but more sustained emotional response to an anxiety-inducing source that may be known, or it might not be able to be recognized by the individual. Anxiety and feelings of fear are controlled and released from the amygdala, and those who suffer from anxiety disorders or similarly PTSD are going to have overactive amygdalas and send constant neural signals from the amygdala to other regions of the brain. Individuals who experience anxiety have this imbalance between the cognitive brain and the emotional brain. And when you're unable to experience rational thought and cognitive thinking, the emotional brain takes over and causes these intense feelings of anxiety. In research, they've been able to identify 2 specific regions, including the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, that are both involved in anxiety disorder. For the former, this region is often amplified in patients suffering from anxiety, and the latter is damaged in patients that experience anxiety. And so knowing these specific regions of the brain help with treatments that we can possibly develop in the future.